As the snow fell silently, a driver discovered a body wrapped in darkness and deceit. The life of Scott Sessions, beloved trumpet player, was brutally extinguished. Friends and family were shattered, struggling to comprehend why someone would annihilate such a vibrant spirit. The investigation unearthed shocking secrets, revealing jealousy and betrayal, leaving a town haunted by the specter of violence and loss that once felt unimaginable. Detectives set up surveillance around Heather's apartment. That's when they discovered a vehicle belonging to Kevin Eastman. Kevin was no stranger to law enforcement. He had a warrant out of Denver for domestic violence, and his history with Heather was riddled with abuse. Neighbors and friends described Kevin as charming when sober, but dangerously unpredictable when drinking. One cell phone data painted a damning picture. On the night Scott vanished, 3 phones were pinging from the same location: Heather's apartment, Scott's phone, Heather's phone, and Kevin's phone. For hours, all 3 remained there. Scott never left alive. Detectives pieced together a theory. Scott had walked into a trap. Either Heather had lured him in or Kevin had discovered their relationship. But inside that apartment, Scott was ambushed. He never had a chance to fight back. The morning after, Kevin's car was tracked traveling to and from the remote mountain area where Scott's body was later found. Surveillance confirmed it. The puzzle pieces were aligning, but there was still one major question. What role did Heather play? Because while investigators were narrowing their sights on Kevin, Heather carried on as though nothing had happened. She didn't report Scott missing. She didn't show panic or guilt. Instead, she went shopping, got her nails done, showed up for work at the diner. Her coworkers noticed she seemed off, distracted, distraught, but she kept moving as though ignoring the storm brewing around her. Behind the scenes, detectives were preparing to arrest both Heather and Kevin. The evidence tied them together in a way that couldn't be ignored. But before police could close in, something horrifying happened. On February 16th, surveillance caught Heather leaving her apartment with Kevin. She looked unsteady, carrying a coat. Kevin followed close behind. She stepped into his vehicle. The 2 drove away. They never returned. The next morning, police tracked Kevin's car to a rural farm belonging to one of his friends. A deputy spotted him tending a burn pit, smoke curling into the cold air. Hours later, detectives moved in to arrest him. On his person, Kevin carried a large knife and 2 spent shell casings, but Heather wasn't with him. She had vanished. Where was Heather Frank? And was she Kevin's partner in crime or his next victim? That's where the story turns darker, and the case begins to unravel in ways no one could have predicted. Heather's disappearance sent investigators scrambling. Was she on the run? Was she hiding out, trying to escape responsibility? Or had she, like Scott, become the victim of Kevin Eastman's violent temper? The truth surfaced just one day later, and it was grim. On February 16th, just hours after she was last seen alive, Heather's body was discovered in a rural Weld County home that belonged to one of Kevin's friends. She was lying in the garage, her throat slashed in the same brutal manner as Scott's. Wrapped in sheets and plastic, she had been doused with gasoline and left with evidence of a hasty attempt at burning. This was no coincidence. Heather had been silenced, the second life snuffed out in less than 2 weeks, but why? Prosecutors believe Heather was initially complicit in Scott's murder. Perhaps she lured him in, knowingly or unknowingly, giving Kevin the opportunity to attack. But after Scott's disappearance, pressure mounted. The police were circling in. Heather was a direct link, and Kevin knew it. If she cracked under interrogation, his secret would spill, and Kevin couldn't allow that. So in a twisted bid to tie up loose ends, he killed her. The woman he had once called his girlfriend, the mother of 3 children, was discarded like trash, just as Scott had been. Detectives now had a double homicide on their hands, and Kevin Eastman was at the center of it. The trial that followed painted Kevin as a man consumed by jealousy, rage, and control. Witnesses testified to years of abuse. Friends recalled Heather confiding in them about Kevin's possessiveness and violence. He was the kind of man who couldn't stand to lose control, especially over a woman he considered his own. The prosecution argued that Kevin discovered Heather's relationship with Scott, and in a jealous fury, he decided Scott had to die. But the brutality didn't stop there. Once Scott was gone, Heather became a liability. And Kevin's solution to every problem was the knife. But the defense had a different story. They painted Heather as manipulative, a woman who pulled Kevin into her drama. They suggested she was the one responsible for Scott's death, that Kevin only helped cover it up. In their version, Kevin killed Heather out of fear, believing she would pin Scott's murder entirely on him. It was a desperate attempt to shift blame to muddy the waters, but the evidence spoke louder than any story. Cell phone data, surveillance footage, DNA, and forensic evidence all pointed squarely at Kevin. His car was tracked to both crime scenes. His DNA was found on the bindings. He was caught burning evidence. And most damning of all, both victims bore the same signature injury, the same violent slash across the throat. It was his calling card, his way of ensuring no one could speak against him. In November 2022, after weeks of testimony, a jury reached its decision. Kevin Eastman was found guilty on multiple charges, including 2 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the families of Scott and Heather, the verdict brought some measure of justice but no true closure. 2 lives had been stolen in acts of senseless cruelty. Scott's family remembered him as a man of passion and music, a man who lived to bring joy to others. At his memorial service, his trumpet sat silently by his photo, a reminder of a melody cut short. Heather's children were left without a mother. Her life had been complicated, her choices tangled in toxic love, but in the end she too was a victim. A woman caught in the grip of a man who saw her not as a partner, but as property. This case remains a haunting reminder of the dangers of toxic relationships, the kind where love turns to obsession, where control masquerades as affection, and where jealousy can spiral into deadly violence. Think about it. How many people right now are in relationships where they're walking on eggshells, where one wrong move could ignite an explosion of rage? How many lives could be saved if warning signs weren't ignored? If you take anything from this story, let it be this: jealousy kills, control kills, silence kills. Scott's only mistake was falling for the wrong person. Heather's mistake was staying tethered to a man who destroyed her. And Kevin Eastman's mistake, his monstrous choice, was believing he had the right to decide who lived and who died. 2 people are gone and dozens of lives are shattered because of him. As we close this case, I want you to reflect. If you or someone you know is in a toxic relationship, don't wait until it's too late. Speak up. Reach out. Because love should never feel like fear.